G'day, how you going? We're in the brewery today. This is a super quick video. No fancy cameras, no lighting, no microphones. It's just a super quick video I was doing for a friend. They want to know how I keg these days, and people have been asking me how I use my sodium metabisulfite and all that sort of thing to keg my beers and not get any oxidation, especially for my NIPAs, and it's helped immensely. Now, firstly, just let me say, there's a lot of fear mongering about sodium metabisulfite. It's been around for donkey's years. We used to use it when I first started brewing 33 years ago. We were using sodium metabisulfite. When I went and did my advanced brewing course, was that 10 years ago, we were using sodium metabisulfite in everything, from filters to kegs to bottling to everything. So don't be afraid of it. Now, there's a few things you don't do. And look, I did it when I was 18 or 19, about a year after I was brewing, of reading the warning on the label. Don't, stick your head in the fermenter, or whatever it used to say, some sort of warnings. Don't breathe this in. And so I did. I had it, sodium metabisulfite mixed up in my fermenter, and I stuck my head in the fermenter, and it takes your breath away because there's no oxygen in there. That's what it does. And that's why it's really, really handy, not just as a sanitizer, but it scrubs oxygen, and that becomes really handy in the brewery. Now, there are some people that are sensitive to it, apparently, because it can be and is classed as a preservative as well. Now, people will freak and go, I don't want preservatives in anything. You need so little, and it's in most wines. There is a trend, of course, the last few years, of not using it, but it's still used in tons and tons of stuff, even foodstuffs. And it is permissible in beer, under 10 parts per million. It doesn't even have to be on the label that it's used. Now, you need an extremely small dose of it to work, to take oxygen out of water. And you need even less if you've pre-boiled the water and it's sort of hot still and you haven't splashed it, because there's less oxygen to start with. But say for this keg clearing I'm going to do, you probably only need about 0.3 of a gram, even maybe less. I'm not sensitive to it. Yes, it took my breath away that time, but that's because it's what it does. It takes oxygen away, right? But I'm not sensitive to it at all. It's in heaps of food. I'm not allergic to it, and nobody I know is allergic to it. But it's just one of those things. There's a lot of fear mongering about it. Now, look, everything's dangerous. Star sand's dangerous. If it's not mixed properly. And it's the same with most chemicals. People go on about using caustic cleaners in the brewery. They'll take your eye out if you haven't got, if it splashes in your eye when you're cleaning. It'll burn holes in your skin. And I'm not, no word of a lie. So stuff, yes, be careful. Be careful. Look into it. You can do your own maths if you like. But yeah, all right. I use about 1/3 of a teaspoon, which is more than you need. There's reasons I do that, and I'll show you that in the video. But as I said, you can probably start with about 0.3 of a gram. You can probably go maybe even a little bit less if you're worried. But you can go and do your study. It's what I do, and it works for me. I used to use star sand to flush my kegs, but I did find I was getting a bit of oxidation. It took a month, 6 weeks, maybe more for it to start browning, but it did. I found this way to reduce that by a lot. I haven't had any browning in the keg at all since I've switched back to sodium metabisulfite. Anyway, that's about it. This was supposed to be really quick. There's no flash. I don't know flash video stuff. I don't know. I was doing it all in the driveway, cleaning the lines and flashing it and all that in the sun, so I don't know how the footage is going to be, but hopefully it makes some sense to you. And yeah, I was going to do a private video just for my friend, and I thought, well, let's just whack it on the channel. Let's just whack it on the channel. Alright, let's get into it. Cheers. I also forgot to mention that it's very, very closely related, of course, to potassium metabisulfite, which is Camden tablets. So not only is it removing oxygen while you're doing all this, it's also removing the chlorine and chloramines. Win-win. And that kind of always made me laugh, how it was sort of demonized for a long while in the USA, but then they loved using their Camden tablets. I may as well say goodbye now, because it's going to be a quick, easy video and I don't have to get the camera out again at the end. Alright, let's go. Just before we get to the actual kegging, this was a brand new keg. and I've already adjusted a little bit here, but the pickup tube was off to the side of the dimple, and it was up, or from the bottom of the dimple, it would have been off the bottom by a good centimetre or half inch. So what I thought I'd do is I'd straighten up the tube a little bit to make it go right down to the bottom and into that dimple. That way when you're emptying or cleaning or sanitizing and you're using the pickup tube to empty the keg, you're leaving very minimal behind. Now the easiest and safest way to bend this is to just do it in the post hole itself. So you just lift it up a little bit and just a gentle pressure, and it'll bend really easy, so be careful. And you might have to straighten it or bend it more, a couple of adjustments to get it exactly where you want it. I personally like it right in that dimple at the bottom, but you've got to make sure you don't push it too far down to the bottom where you might restrict the flow, and that'll give you a bad pour. But so you just want it sitting in that dimple somewhere. And while I'm getting ready to flush my keg, I'm also cleaning my transfer lines. This is a little jumper from beer to beer. It's not universal, it only works on beer lines. But I can hook up my transfer line, which is just a line with 2 beer disconnects, and I also have a little line with a party tap on the end that I can use for taking readings and tastings and things like that. So I just clean them both at once. I put the little joiner in and I hook it up to my trusty old pressure weed sprayer bottle that has a carb cap on the end so I can take the quick disconnects. I run a sodium bicarbonate mix through them and I just let them sit there cleaning while I'm doing other things with the keg. Luckily we have great water here in Melbourne, so I can just take my keg over and fill it up from the tap. Of course, if you start with hot water or pre-boiled water, you'll have less oxygen there to start with, and you can use less sodium metabisulfite. But that's maths you'll have to do yourself. I just use tap water. And then I top it right up to the top. So here's where I add my metabisulfite. I use about 1/3 of a teaspoon. As I said, you can use much less. From memory, when I looked into it, it was about 1/3 of a gram was all you needed. Now that's up to you. Now I give it a gentle stir. I don't go crazy. I don't make sure it's all dissolved. I know that the little amount you need to do the job will have nearly dissolved instantly. The stirring just helps distribute it. And what I like to get is a little bit of sodium metabisulfite that isn't dissolved and it's sitting in the bottom of the keg. I think you can see it down there at the bottom. Now this way I know when I empty the keg that even if I haven't taken out all the oxygen in all of the water, by the time it gets down to the bottom of the keg, that little bit of water at the left is going to be sodium metabisulfite saturated, and that means no oxygen at all in that little bit of water that's going to be left in the keg. And that's what I'm after. I also don't mind a little bit going into the beer, a tiny bit, because that acts as a preservative, as I said, and it also, if you happen to pick up any oxygen somewhere accidentally, it all helps at getting rid of it. You may have noticed just then, as I put the lid on, I do pull up on the pressure relief valve, so when I put the lid on, the water can get right up into the bottom of that lid, and I'm not trapping a bubble of air under the lid. So now the keg's completely full of the sodium metabisulfite mixture. I hook up the gas. What pressure you use is up to you. Just for emptying it like this, I only have a few psi on, maybe 4 or 5 psi. So I hook my hoses up, give them a rinse out, just to rinse out the sodium bicarbonate mixture. So then I take off my little picnic tap setup and let the rest of the keg drain out. If you're worried about leaving any behind, you can give it a wiggle. The keg at the end, and that'll stir up, the bottom, mix it up a bit better, and also help you drain. It'll make sure all that water gets down into that dimple. And when the keg's completely drained, make sure you firstly take out the carb cap or the connector or whatever you've been using to keep that line open. Take that out first. So now I know the keg and the line are full of CO2. At this stage I usually up the pressure to about 10 psi, because that's what I use for transfer. Again, I can give the keg a little shake to make sure everything's drained out to that little dimple. I can push in the post of the transfer line, all just to make sure everything's flush with CO2, and then I'll leave it for about 15 seconds to pressurise out to that 10 psi. Normally I could leave that transfer line hooked up and do the full transfer leaving it hooked up, but I'm going to put some finings in the bottom of this keg. The finings I'll be using today are Biofine. You can use gelatin as mentioned, but Biofine's ready mixed. There's no mixing it up, no heating it up, no anything. You can add it in. I'm adding it to the bottom of the keg and filling on top so it gets nice and mixed in by itself. You can add it after you've kegged, but yeah, you'll have to make sure it's mixed through like you do with gelatin. And of course you don't need to use finings at all, but I thought I'd add it in just to show people how to do it if they want to use them. The way I do it is very simple, and I thought I'd show you how I make the setup. Simply a PET bottle and a carb cap and a little bit of line. Keep testing it, cut the line so it just hits the bottom of the bottle, and I cut the line on a bit of an angle so it doesn't sit flat anywhere. But you just want to make sure it's sitting right there in the bottom of one of them dimples. I then put my Biofine, as I said you could use gelatin, into the bottom of the bottle. I then twist the bottle around so the line is out of the fluid, and I flush it with CO2. I hook up the CO2 line, I loosen the lid off, and I give the bottle a good flush of CO2. That way the bottle's full of CO2. I then pressure it to higher than the keg. My keg's at about 10 psi, so I just have to pressurise the bottle to about 15 psi. I have a small transfer line made up just for this. I'll hook that up to my pressurised bottle, making sure the line's out of the liquid, just to flush some CO2 through this small line. Then I'll repressurise the bottle just to make sure it's going to be above the keg pressure. I then twist it to make sure that the pickup tube I put in there is in the fluid I want to transfer. And then I simply hook it up to the keg, to the gas line, and it gets forced into the keg.
Make sure. And there you go, all that just shot down in there and is now in the keg, and the keg's still full of CO2 with no oxygen.
The reason I use the gas line, I can do it to full kegs and go in through the gas line so it goes in through the top. And my fittings are both gas fittings on that transfer line, so I use the gas line on the empty keg as well. So now we have a keg full of CO2 with a little bit of finings in the bottom.
Space in here at the moment's a little bit hectic. My garage flooded again the other day, so everything's been put on boxes and things and packed everywhere. I've brought my gas bottle over. I haven't touched the regulator at all, so it's at the same pressure that the keg's at still. This is lower. From crash chilling after the ferment, it's only at about 2 or something, 3 psi. Take that off, and we'll pressurise this up to the same pressure as everything else. I ended up buying another one of these so I didn't have to chop and change, because when you're transferring I'd prefer not to have the gauge in there just in case you do get beer up there. You know, I'd rather not mess around with that, so you can just take the gauge off. That's what I used to do. Close it. That can go on the gas post. This, it's got CO2 in it, remember? No oxygen. Go in the beer. And into the keg. Slowly see it start to go. It's only going slow. It'll equalise out soon, but we don't really want it to. If your beer's carbonated, you might take the first few litres slow, and so you've got a where your beer's going in down your pickup tube, you've got a nice solid lump of beer down there, so it's not going to foam up if you speed it up a little bit. But all you got to do to get it really running, I just usually go by my sticker on the side or the condensation on the keg, and it's a sort of a combination of both. But my sticker, it doesn't matter if your levels, you know, if you've stuck your sticker in the wrong spot, the litres are still going to be roughly right to where we're going. So mine's saying 25 litres here, or 24 and a half. And I know that's only because this is crooked. If I stood it upright, it'd be at 22 litres, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're at 24 and a half. I want to get 18 litres at least into here. So what's that, 6? We'll go down to about the 6 litre mark. You want to keep some pressure on. Not much, you don't need much. And that's it. Your finings, your gelatin or your biofine or whatever you're using are in the bottom of the keg, so they get nice and mixed into the beer. It's really important. You can, because there's no oxygen in this keg after it's full, you can sort of give it a quick roll just to make sure it's mixed in, but you shouldn't have any issues doing it like this. But I still, you know, give it a little bit of one quick roll just to make sure it is all mixed in. Your finings, you'll find they work a lot better than just dropping them in the top. They don't magically seek out every bit of liquid then. Like, if you mix it in, they really work better. Alright, this will take about 20 minutes, something like that. As I said, don't walk away. Well, you can use one of those fittings, the flow stoppers, which I do have, but I don't often use because I'm usually around and watching it. Otherwise, yeah, you'll end up squirting beer out everywhere. If you're worried and you are walking away, which is a bit silly, because you'll empty your keg. You won't empty your keg, it'll stop once it, you know, gets enough beer out of there and beer squirts out of here. But you could put a bit of tube into a bucket. But I don't walk away. I know this takes about 20 minutes. I might put a timer on for 5 to 10 minutes so it reminds me to come back and see how it's going. This looks pretty clear anyway. Probably didn't even need a biofine in this. But it'll clear it up nice. Should have had that a little bit higher, but you can see the gas is just on the gas and the beer's on the beer. You can pick up the condensation on the bottom of the keg. I mean, this doesn't work at all times of year, but this beer's at about 1 degree at the moment. It's about 20 degrees here today or more, so it's working really well. I'll just kick that. You might be able to hear that. That's my 10-minute timer I set. So we're going quite fast today. We are down to about 9.5 litre mark, so we haven't got much to go. Only got a few litres to go. Sorry, I just bumped the stand. You might be able to see on the keg here, we're up to about there. We're going pretty fast. You know, it might be another 5 minutes. I've never really timed it before. Some days it's about 20 minutes. This is might be a little bit faster today. Alright, so that keg's full. 30 psi for about 30 hours. You should be right. I go a little bit more, 35 psi for about 30 hours. No, not much longer. I usually actually go, and somewhere between 24 and 30 hours whenever I'm sort of around to do it. Don't leave it much longer. Don't do the 2-day one, it will be overcarbed. The people that somehow do it for 2 days, they must start warm or something, because if you do it from this cold for 2 days, it's going to be overcarbed every time. And yes, I have changed clothes. I was in my pyjama pants before, or my trackie pants, and it got too hot. And I had my good shoes on, which I always spill beer on, so I try and swap them. Now this is flat, of course. Oh, it's about 2 psi. Beer would be out. Whenever I take a beer line off something, I always give it just a wipe. Just saves that beer drying on things. And if I spill it on the ground like I did before, I'll clean that up. There we go. So it is hazy. You'll see in my tasting video of this, or if this video makes it up. I'll probably want to get this video up fast. Although, I'll see. Because this Biofine, once I go and put this back in the fridge, and I'll put it on the gas, it doesn't really matter, but I want it carved. So I will put it on the gas. It will be done in like 2 days. And you'll get a big cup of sludge, and then after that it'll come clear. But this is Dave's Australian Lager. Pride of Ringwood, Super Pride. Lovely. Oh, I still could have went a bit more bitter. But I don't know. No, actually that's pretty good. It's very, very cold. And not carb, but a bit darker than last time. I think I like this yeast better. Nice, that's cleaner. Alright, thanks for watching. That's the kegging video. Done, dusted.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, and thanks to my Patreons.